The Pfaff-Creative 7550, the ultimate technology for the ultimate creativity. With your Pfaff-Creative 7550 and your imagination, you can create your own very special brand of sewing magic. The magic is at your fingertips.
Hi, and welcome to part 2 of our how-to video on the exciting world of the incredibly versatile Pfaff-Creative 7550. I'm Philip Pepper, and this is Kathy Wilkinson. We're part of the educational staff at Pfaff. Kathy and I are eager to show you more advanced techniques on your Creative 7550.
That's right, Philip. We'll show you how to design and enter your own original designs. We'll use some of the optional accessories, do some cross-stitching, border embroideries, and shadow applique.
And don't forget the heirloom sewing and free motion embroidery with Richelieu cut work. Those are my personal favorites. Let's start with designing your own pea memories. You have several samples here, Kathy. Why don't you show them to us?
Yes, we do. We have a jacket to wear for ballet class. The sleeves of the jacket have a design of ballet slippers. The stitch was designed using the creative designer. This vest was inspired by a traditional Scandinavian costume. All the flowers are pea memories that were given in Pfaff Club magazine number 8. This magazine is full of ideas, tips, and information on new accessories and notions. It's available at your local Pfaff dealer.
That's beautiful. Some of those flowers look a little intricate for a first try at designing.
Yes, they are. So I'm going to start with a simple diamond shape to demonstrate the basics. I have already drawn the diamond on the graph and marked each of the 4 corners with a dot. I also marked a dot between them. I now have 8 dots or stitches. On the graph paper, each stitch has a set of 2 coordinates, B and L. The B coordinates refer to the width, and the L coordinates refer to the length. It's not necessary to know the coordinates to enter a stitch, but they can be useful later when you want to fine-tune your design. I've numbered all the dots starting with the number 1 at the bottom. Notice that the bottom dot has 2 numbers, number 1 and number 9. The first and the last stitch must be made at the same coordinates in order to complete this design. Connect all the dots and number them in order. This will make it easier to follow along with me. Now let's insert the graph into the CD. On each side of the CD there is a clip. Move the clip toward you. Insert the graph paper into the slot in the front like this. Now we need to align the graph paper. So move the magnifier slider and make sure that the red cross marks line up with the borders of the graph paper. When it is aligned, move the clips away from you and lock it in place. Make sure your machine is turned off. Connect the CD by plugging it in to the port in the left side of the machine. Turn your machine on now. Select the P memories by pressing the P key. The P memories are shown across the top of the screen. If there is nothing below the memory number, it is empty. P0 has a stitch in it. P1 is empty. Press the key below a memory to open it. I'll open P1. Before we enter any stitches, there is one more very important step. Move the magnifier slide around the outer edge of the rectangle on the Creative Designer. If you look carefully, you can see a cross moving on the screen. This crosses the cursor, and it follows the same movement as the magnifier slide on the Creative Designer. Stop the magnifier slide in the lower left corner. This step orients the CD with the cursor. This should always be done whenever you plug in the CD. There are 2 keys on the CD. The left key is the Mem Plus key, and it's used to enter the coordinates into the memory. The right key is the memory key, and it's used to search for and then display a specific stitch. We'll use it later when we add and delete stitches. Let's start entering the stitches. Move the slide to stitch number 1. Now press the Mem Plus key on the Creative Designer to enter it. Now to stitch 2. And press Mem Plus. Stitch 3, Mem Plus, 4, Mem Plus, 5, mem plus, 6, mem plus, 7, mem plus, 8, mem plus, and 9, mem plus. I entered 9 stitch points, but all I can see is the diamond shape. To display the dots at the stitch points, press the key below the dotted line. Now you can see all the points clearly. I'm finished programming, so I'll press the key below the sewing machine icon. The display changes from the programming screen to the sewing screen. Here at the lower left are the program width and length icons. On the right is the balance. Below that are 2 icons. The left one is a box with a C. It clears or deletes the entire memory. I'll press the key below it to show you. A warning message appears asking if I really want to delete the pattern. I don't, so I'll press Escape. The next one is the Edit icon. It changes to the editing screen. This is where I'll make changes later. The machine now treats P1 with our original design just like any other built-in stitch. We can change the width, length, and balance, and we can put it into an M memory and combine it with other stitches. For now, let's just sew it. It sewed it out just as I drew it. Now let's edit the stitch. First, access the edit screen by pressing the key below the edit icon. At the lower left is a menu with 3 command icons. By pressing the key below each icon, you can access the delete stitch commands, add stitch commands, or trace the stitching path. The M+ icon lets you add stitches. The mem icon lets you trace the path of the stitch. The M- icon deletes stitches. Selecting any of these menu options will further change the commands and icons at the right of the screen. And I'll explain these as we use them. Let's delete a stitch first. Press the key below the M- icon. The commands at the right of the screen allow me to choose where I want to delete a stitch. You move the cursor by pressing the key below the menu. The first icon, a dotted line with an arrow pointing to the end, means I can delete a stitch at the end of a stitch pattern. The next icon, a dotted line with an arrow between 2 stitches, means I can delete a stitch within the stitch pattern. The last icon is an empty box. It means I can delete the entire stitch pattern. I want to delete a stitch within the stitch pattern, number 5, so I'll highlight the second icon. Move the magnifier slide around the outside once. Move the cursor directly over stitch number 5. Press the memory key on the Creative Designer. Look at the screen. It has a question box next to the stitch number 5. It's asking me if it's okay to delete the stitch. So the computer has searched for the stitches at my cursor position and then displayed the stitch. Yes, I want to delete the stitch. Press OK. The diamond has a flat top. Let's sew the change design. Press the key below the sewing machine icon. The single pattern key should still be engaged. The top part isn't there, just like on the screen. Let's insert that same stitch back in its original place. Press the key below the edit icon. The M+ icon is already highlighted. Let's look at the menu to the right to see what the command choices are. The first icon is a dotted line with an arrow pointing to the end. This means I can add a stitch at the end of the stitch pattern. The next icon, a dotted line with an arrow between 2 stitches, means I can insert a stitch within the stitch pattern. The next icon, a dotted line with an arrow pointing both left and right, means I can move an existing stitch to a new position. The last icon is a dotted line with a box around several of the stitches. It means I can move a block of stitches as a group to a new location. I want to insert a stitch within the stitch pattern, so I'll highlight the second icon. Move the magnifier slide around the outside once. When you are using this command to insert a stitch between two existing stitches, you must always go to the stitch that is before the place where you want to insert a new stitch. I want to insert a stitch at the top. The stitch before that place is this one here on the left. So move the cursor directly over stitch number 4 and press the memory key on the Creative Designer. A box opens showing the stitch number, and in this case it's stitch number 4. The cursor is now attached to the line between stitches 4 and 5. Drag the cursor to the top of the screen. See how the line follows the cursor movement. I can move it anywhere that I want. We'll move it back to the top and press the Mem Plus key on the Creative Designer. The new stitch is now in place and the cursor is no longer attached. We have the original stitch pattern again.
You explained that very well, Kathy. I know you do a lot of P-memory, so you must have some little tip or shortcut to share with us.
Well, I do have a few tips. For instance, the spacing on the graph is something to keep in mind. The width of the actual graph is 2 inches. This comes in handy when you're Xeroxing or tracing a design that is larger or smaller than the graph. Another thing I found out simply from experience is the fewer the stitch points, the better, especially when the design is a straight stitch outline. If your design calls for a lot of satin stitching, it will work out better if you program it to zigzag across the width rather than forward and backward.
Good hints, Kathy. But we don't always have to design an original. We can alter some of the built-in stitches from the sewing machine. Didn't you ever wish a stitch was a little different here or satin stitch there?
I certainly have, and I'm sure you're going to show us all how to manipulate the built-in stitches.
That's right. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you how now. First, you need to access the P memories. Press the P key. Now open an empty memory. Good, here's one. At the bottom center are 2 words, ROM and RAM. ROM gives you access to the built-in stitches and RAM gives you access to existing P memory stitches. Press ROM for the built-in stitches. Now we can enter a program number. Enter 137 and press OK. What I'm going to do is delete the center stitches at the ends of the petals, the ones that go back toward the center to form the little points. Press M- to open the Delete Stitch menu. Highlight the second icon, the Delete Stitch within the Pattern command. I need to see my stitch dots, so I'll press the key below the Show Stitch icon. That's better. Orient the CD and the cursor. I'll start here in the upper left petal. Move the cursor over the stitch. Press the memory key on the CD, and yes, I want to delete this stitch, so press OK. Move to the next stitch. Press the memory key, and yes, I want to delete, so press OK. To the next stitch, memory key, and again OK. Down to the next one, memory key, and OK. Next stitch, memory, and OK. On to the next stitch, memory key, and OK again. Next stitch, memory key, OK. Next stitch, memory key, OK. And we've finished. Let's sew it out. Press the key below the sewing machine icon. Let's see what the new stitch looks like. Now I'll sew the original stitch right next to the new stitch. Press the 09, enter 137, and OK. As you will see, the manipulated one looks quite different. I changed a chrysanthemum into a daisy.
From looking at the new stitch patterns, you'd never guess which built-in stitch was the original stitch. At the rate you're manipulating stitches, your Creative 7550 will have triple the amount of stitches. Let's do something different now. How about showing us some of your heirloom sewing techniques, Philip?
Okay, Kathy. Heirloom sewing has some of my favorite techniques. The fabrics used in heirloom sewing are very delicate, such as organdy and batiste. These delicate fabrics require delicate seams and finishes. Rolling and whipping is an edge finish that is used quite a lot. I used an extra accessory foot called the applique foot. This foot is totally clear and has very short toes. If you look at the underside, you'll notice a groove. If you use a gimp cord such as cording or pearl cotton, this groove allows the gimp cord to feed smoothly under the foot.
Well, is this what you've done on the pillowcase? Right here on either side of the faggoting.
Yes, I always use a corded, rolled, and whipped edge for machine faggoting. It's a simple and very useful technique. Let's go to the machine and I'll demonstrate it for you. Snap on the applique foot. Press the 09 key and enter program number 2, the zigzag stitch. Press OK. Reduce your stitch length to 1.0 and the width to 2.0. Place the fabric under the foot so that the raw edge is centered between the toes. Place the pearl cotton on top of the raw edge. The left swing of the needle will go into the fabric and the right swing will go beyond the fabric. This part of the stitch will be sewn off the fabric or in the air. It's the stitch that's formed in the air that rolls the fabric. Watch. It's a neat edge and so easy to do. The pearl cotton edge is great for a scarf or shawl hem. It also makes faggoting easier.
I knew you had another technique, Philip. Why don't you tell us about the faggoting?
Okay, Kathy. Faggoting is joining two pieces together with an open or feather stitch. The pillowcase is a good example of faggoting over rolled and whipped edges. Notice the clean rolled edges and the open lacy look in between. The open work is the faggoting.
That is so delicate looking. What foot do you use?
I like to use the 7-groove cording foot. There's also a 5-groove cording foot, but the 7-groove works best for faggoting. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you the technique and the foot. The 7-groove is a clear plastic foot. If you turn it over, you'll see the 7 grooves underneath. I have 2 pieces of batiste with the edges already rolled and whipped with the pearl cotton filler. Place the fabric under the presser foot so that the rolled edges are in the first grooves to the left and right of center, like this. Select program 17 and reduce the width to 5.0 and the length to 3. The grooves will guide the fabric an even distance apart and at just the right spot for the needle to catch the fabric at the left and right swings. Keep your eyes on the way the rolled edge is feeding under the foot, and don't let it wander around. It's such an easy technique to do.
I have to try your method of faggoting. I have a different way of sewing faggoting. Here's a blouse I made with a different type of faggoting. It's a little wider and more open than yours, Philip. I use a different guide, too. I'd like to use the cording blade to help guide the fabric.
This is a cording blade. They come 2 in a set. They're marked with the number 1 or 2 on the end. They are usually used to make raised pin tucks.
For the faggoting, I use the number 1 blade and the number 2A foot. With this method, you need to have a fold at the edges and not a rolled hem. Let me show you at the machine. I'm using program number 114, and I've changed the width to 9 millimeters. The cording blade fits right here into this hole at the front of the needle plate. Snap the cording blade into place, and make sure you're using foot 2A. Place your fabric along the widest part of the cording blade on either side, right here. Now sew slowly and engage the sew slow key if you think it's necessary. When you've finished your row, gently remove the fabric from under the presser foot, and don't pull because you don't want to pull those last stitches out of shape. And there you have it. It's a little different method that gives a slightly different look, but just as pretty. My way allows you to use a 9 millimeter wide stitch for the faggoting.
You could try program 146 and 157 with a 9 millimeter stitch width. They would look good too. While we're talking about cording feet and blades, we should do some pin tucks. The blouse has plain corded pin tucks, but you could also make shadow tucks. Shadow tucks are made the same as regular corded pin tucks, but a colored pearl cotton is used as a filler. I like to use a 2.0 twin needle and a 5-groove cording foot.
You could also use the 5-groove cording foot with a 2.5 millimeter twin needle for a slightly deeper tuck. Philip, why not go to the machine and show us how to do a corded tuck and one using a cording blade?
That's a good idea, Kathy. Follow me to the machine. First, you want to snap off the needle plate. Thread the pearl cotton through the round hole. Now snap the needle plate back onto the machine. Don't worry about the pearl cotton getting stuck. There's a small groove in the needle plate that will accommodate the thickness of the pearl cotton. Although you do have to watch the pearl cotton in front of the machine as you're sewing, because it can easily tangle or get caught on something. Close the bobbin case door and replace the accessory box. I'll sew the first pin tuck for you. Now that the first tuck is in place, I can guide the following rows by simply letting the groove in the foot guide my sewing. Let's sew another row. You can make as many rows as you like. Sometimes I don't want a filler cord in my pin tuck, so I'll just use the cording blade. Remove the filler cord. I use the number 1 blade with my 7-groove cording foot and the number 2 blade with the 5-groove cording foot. Snap the blade in the hole that the pearl cotton was traveling through and then sew your tucks as usual. The blade holds the fabric up when the tuck is being formed so that you will get a deeper tuck than without it, and it reduces the bulk that the pearl cotton would add. It also makes a sharper tuck. You can even make curved tucks. Let me sew one for you. The only thing you can't do is turn a sharp corner with the needles down in the fabric. You'll twist them and possibly break a needle.
I'm going to have to put some curved pin tucks on a blouse soon. That's a good tip about pivoting with a twin needle, Philip.
Thank you, Kathy. When you're doing any type of sewing with twin needles, it's a good idea to limit the use of the needle down key.
I use the cording blade when I have pin tucks down the front of a blouse. I don't like the stiffness of the cording on the front, but corded pin tucks are great on collars and cuffs. How is this stitch done, Philip? It looks much like the purchased entre-deux that you can get in the store.
That entre-deux was a stitch taken straight from the built-in stitches in the machine. You do need to use a wing needle, though.
This is a wing needle. Viewing it from the front, it looks like it has wings around the needle eye. This wide extension will make holes in the fabric as you sew.
Yes, it's the holes that the needle makes in the fabric that gives it its special look. The wing needle works best on 100% natural fabrics in a sheer to medium weight. If you're in doubt about the compatibility of the fabric and the needle, take the needle with you to the fabric store and push it through the fabric in an inconspicuous spot. If the hole disappears, then the fabric won't be suitable. If it does leave a hole and it takes a little rubbing to make it disappear, then the fabric will work. Wing needles come in size 100 and 120. The 120 will make a larger hole. I use both sizes when I'm doing heirloom sewing. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you how to set the machine up. The heirloom stitches are all together on the stitch chart. Press the 09 key, then the info key. See, they're right here, group number 6. The group is called hem stitches. Press the key numbered 6. Now you can see all 10 different heirloom stitches. I'll select program number 114, which is the one above the number 5 key. A stitch width of 3 millimeters is perfect. The length should be set at 2.5. It's a beautiful heirloom stitch program. Another stitch I use a lot is program 115. I want to change the stitch length to 2.5 and the stitch width to 3.5. Let's try this one. This program makes a heavier entree. The needle goes into the holes many more times. These stitches can be used anywhere you would use entree. And the great thing is that it's always ready to use. No running out to the specialty shop. Using these two stitches instead of the expensive entree insertions have another benefit besides being less expensive. You can match the entree to your fabric. You're not limited to the colors in the shop. And here's another great hint for you, Kathy. Sometimes when your fabric is a little limp, you can stabilize it by applying several coats of spray starch, but only on natural fiber fabrics. For a stiffer stabilizer, this Helmar's fabric stiffener just can't be beat, and it washes out in plain water. It works great on both natural fiber fabrics and blends to stabilize embroidery stitches also.
I've got one more idea before we leave heirloom sewing. It's the type of pin stitch. This stitch is very versatile. It can be used for joining lace to fabric on heirloom projects. In quilting, it is used for an invisible applique stitch, or as part of the design. It was used to applique the flowers and leaves in this wall hanging. Many different stitches were used to applique the flowers and leaves. You can see the stitch best on this leaf here in the upper corner. The size has been reduced to fit the proportions of the leaves. Here's a shadow applique placemat with the same stitch. It's nearly invisible because of its tiny size and matching thread color.
There's a little trick we know about this stitch. We fool the machine into reducing the width beyond the option it gives us.
Right. I'll show you how to fool the machine now. Select program number 12, the one that looks like a blanket stitch. I'm using a standard needle and I'm going to change the stitch width to 3. I'll also engage my pattern mirror key. I'll sew a little so you can see the width. Now I'll engage the twin needle key. This is the only change I'm making. I have not changed the width. You can see how tiny the stitch is. The trick to making this stitch narrow enough is the twin needle key. When the twin needle key is engaged, it reduces the width of any stitch by 2 millimeters. Program number 12 can be reduced manually only to 2 millimeters, so we trick the machine into reducing it down to 1 millimeter width by engaging the twin needle key.
Neat trick, Kathy. I'm going to experiment on other stitches with that one. Next, I'll show you how to do some free motion cut work with Richelieu bars. The design on this collar is an example of cut work. In the open spaces or thread lines are bars. These are the Richelieu bars. Not only do they look good, but they help the cut areas to hold their shape. A hoop is very important when doing cut work. The fabric must be held very tight or you'll get poor results. I like to use the spring hoop like this. It's easy and quick to reposition any place on your fabric.
I prefer a wooden machine embroidery hoop. It's very thin and has a screw that I use to make the hoop real tight. My fabric can never move or stretch. It does take time to tighten it up whenever you need to move it.
Whichever hoop you prefer to use, you will still need a stabilizer. For cut work, a water-soluble stabilizer is best. This is what it looks like.
It looks like plastic food wrap, but it dissolves completely in water. It will leave a starched feel to the fabric if you don't remove all of it. Sometimes you want the finished piece to be starched.
I like my cut work to have a very crisp look and feel. In fact, I like the stabilizer to be that way too. I press it with a medium hot dry iron using a press cloth. Don't forget to use the press cloth or you'll end up with a mess on your iron. So let's hoop up. Place the large outer ring on a flat surface. Place the stabilizer on top. I like to use 2 layers of the stabilizer. Place the fabric on top and finally the inner ring in the hook. The first thing I do is to zigzag around each of the design elements that will be cut out.
Do you use a foot for the first stitching, or is your method totally free motion, Philip?
I always use the darning foot. It's a standard accessory that comes with the machine. Notice the clear finger that sticks up and away from the foot itself and the silver pin coming out of the black box.
Philip, why not go to the machine and show us how to properly attach the darning foot?
Good idea, Kathy. To attach the darning foot, loosen the screw at the back of the presser foot. But don't take it all the way out. Insert the silver pin into the hole below the screw. Make sure the clear finger is behind the needle clamp screw. Now tighten the screw. Your Pfaff-Creative has a special darning position for darning and machine embroidery. Let me show you where it is. This is the down or normal sewing position. This is the raise position. Now, if you lower the presser foot while slightly pushing away from yourself, you'll find a position in between the up and down. This is the darning position. It keeps the foot off the fabric when a stitch is not being formed, but it still engages the needle tension. Now, let's drop the feed dogs and close the cover. We need to select program number 2, a zigzag stitch. Reduce the width to 1.5. I'm going to zigzag around the outline first. Put the hook under the foot and lower the presser bar into the darning position. Stitch around all of your design lines once. Now, trim only the fabric away. Be careful not to cut into the stabilizer. Sometimes it's helpful to use a seam ripper to cut a slit in the fabric first. This is the time to make the Richelieu bars. They're always made before the final satin stitching. Change to a straight stitch and stitch across the cutouts right onto the stabilizer. Make sure that you secure the beginnings and ends very well. If you don't, they'll pull out. Stitch across once and then back over. To complete the Richelieu bars, satin stitch over the straight stitch rows with a 2 mm zigzag stitch. To complete your cut work, satin stitch around the raw edges with a 3 mm zigzag stitch. It takes a little effort, but it's worth it. When it's all finished, gently pull off as much of the stabilizer as you can. The little bits left will dissolve in water. Then press it face down on a towel. This way you won't flatten the satin stitches out. You'll be making them stand out more.
Well, that's beautiful. I just love the look of cut work, and you make it look so simple, Philip.
Well, thanks, Kathy. But it is simple once you get the knack of it.
There's another way to embellish with a similar open, airy look. It's using eyelets.
Well, you do like your shortcuts, but I agree. I like the look of eyelets too. I've used them on this collar and pinafore. On the pinafore, I wove a ribbon through the eyelets for added interest at the hemline.
Shortcuts maybe, but they're fun to do. Your eyelets are elegant and mine are just plain fun. Here's an eyelet hat with lots of different eyelets. Some of the built-in decorative stitches were sewn around the basic eyelet to add more interest. To make eyelets, you need an eyelet plate. This is the eyelet plate. It's an extra accessory. It's a black rectangular plate with a post. It fits on the needle plate right over the feed dogs.
A hoop is essential when making eyelets. It holds the fabric tight and makes it easier to rotate the fabric. Place the fabric in the hoop just like I did before. You don't need a stabilizer unless the fabric is very flimsy. Then I would use a water-soluble stabilizer.
I'll show you how to attach and use the eyelet plate. Remove the presser foot. You can remove the ankle too. I've removed it so you can see better. Now attach the eyelet plate. Hold the plate so that you can read the number on it and the post is on the left. The rear prongs go into the feed dog opening and the front prongs go over the edge of the needle plate. You'll hear it snap into place. I like to lower my feed dogs. So push the slide to the right and close everything back up. With an awl or a scissors, poke a small hole in the fabric where you want the eyelet. Then gently push the hole over the post on the plate. Select program number 32 and change the width to 2 millimeters. I also need to engage my mirror image key. The stitch comes up in the right needle position and we want the needle to be in the left position. Now take one stitch to bring up the bobbin thread to the top. And move it out of the way. Lower the presser bar to the darning position. With the foot and ankle removed, it's easy to forget to lower it. Place your hands on the hoop in a position that makes it easy for you to rotate the hoop. And now stitch around the eyelet. If you sew too slow or move the hoop too fast, you won't get a good satin stitch, but you can always go over it a second time. There are a lot of decorative stitches that you can use to enhance the eyelet. Some to try are programs number 63, a triangle, 60, a half circle, and 71, boxes. Try any stitch and you'll be surprised at the different looks. The only ones that won't work are the stitches with a reverse action. This stuffed clown's hair was made with the fringe foot. It's just rows and rows of stitching. Here's an embroidered picture. The flowers are all made with the fringe foot. The flowers are sewn with rayon embroidery thread in 2 different shades of purple and 1 variegated purple. The embroidery design was an old transfer pattern that I ironed onto my fabric. I used a tear-away stabilizer underneath.
This is the fringe foot. It's an extra accessory. Notice the blade or fin in the center of the foot. The zigzag stitches are sewn over this fin and then fall off at the back. This is how the fringe foot loops are formed.
Fringe flowers are always sewn from the outer edge into the center. To mark your flower placement, draw the outer circumference of the flower. You can use a spool of thread or one of the thread unreeling discs to draw the circle. It's a good size to begin with. Let's go to the machine and set it up for fringe flowers. Select program number 2, the zigzag. Change the length to 0.25 and the width to 2 millimeters. We want a very dense fringe. Center the foot on the line and sew the outside ring. When you reach your starting place, guide the foot so the next ring will be sewn as close to the first as you can get. The foot will just right over the previous row of stitching. As the circle gets smaller, I will have to stop and pivot the foot just a little bit so that I can get around that tight circumference. And I'll continue doing that until I get to the middle. When I'm all finished with my fringe flower, gently remove the stitches from the back of the fin. And there we have our fringe flower.
That's an impressive technique and easy to do. If you look at the centers of the flowers, you can see some yellow stitching in the middle. How did you do the centers, Kathy?
The easiest way to do it is to sew the center first. I used program number 165. Depending on the size of the flower, reduce the width to 3 or 4 millimeters. This stitch automatically changes the length at the same time to keep the round shape. Mark the center of the circle, engage the single pattern key, and sew one dot. You can sew all the flower centers at one time and then all the fringe flowers.
I have another extra accessory that I use a lot for decorative work. It's called the single needle cording foot or the 3-groove cording foot. It's very different from the other cording feet we've used. This one is mainly for couching cords. I used it on the yoke of this blouse. It has one long toe on the left side of the foot. Just in front of the needle hole on the top of the foot are 2 grooves. On the underside, right in the middle, is a single groove.
Well, what types of cords did you use? I've only used the pearl cotton.
Most any cord that is about the same thickness as pearl cotton. I like to use novelty cords, but yarns would look great too. Let me show you how to use the foot. The cord fits in the grooves and is held in place as it goes under the needle. Cut 3 lengths of pearl cotton or a decorative cord. Select program 71 and reduce the width to 6 millimeters. Always check the stitch width when using this foot. If the stitch is too wide, it may not couch the cords in the proper place. Engage the mirror image and needle down key. Now, place your fabric under the foot and follow along with me. I like to load this presser foot from the left because it's easier. Tap your foot control 1 time to sink the needle in the fabric. Raise the presser foot and bring the cord through the opening in the middle of the foot, under the groove in the back, and into the slot on the top in the front of the foot. Sew this program until the machine completes the left square. The middle cord goes only under the middle groove in the foot on the bottom. Raise the presser foot, place it under the foot, again only under the bottom. Sew the program until the machine completes the middle square of the stitch. The right program loads exactly as the left did. Raise the presser foot, bring the cord through the opening in the middle of the foot, under the groove in the back, and into the slot on the top in the front. And now you're ready to sew. Disengage the needle down key, and it's just that easy. This is a couching technique that can be very effective with some of the other stitches too. Here are just 4 examples. From the left, the first one is the one we just did, number 71. The second is number 70. The third program is 116, and the last is program number 3. Experiment with different types of cords. Try 3 different colors and other stitch programs also. Just remember to reduce the stitch width to 6 millimeters. What do we have here, Kathy? It looks interesting.
It's a coaster with a counted cross-stitch design. The design was entirely embroidered by machine on a 6-count cross-stitch cloth. Look at this one, Philip, another counted cross-stitch pattern. This one is even more delicate. It was done on 14-count cross-stitch cloth.
That's beautiful, but it looks so intricate. Was it difficult to do, Kathy?
It's not difficult, but it is delicate work. It's faster than hand cross-stitching, but it still takes a lot of time, especially the hearts because they're done on 14-count cloth and it's very small. They're both patterns from a hand cross-stitch book. The stitches fit into the holes just like hand cross-stitching would.
Would you share with us which cross-stitch programs you used and the size of cross-stitches for each count?
Okay, I used program number 102 for all the cross stitches. On the 6th count, which is the coaster, I left it exactly the way the machine set it, which is 4 millimeters for the length and width. The framed hearts are on the smaller 14-count cloth. I reduced the stitch to the smallest it will go. That's 2 millimeters for both the length and width.
Would you recommend counted cross-stitch as your first cross-stitch project, Kathy?
Yes, with one hint. Don't use the Aida cloth for the first try. A plain weave cloth is a little easier since you're not watching the holes. I would suggest starting with a plain weave type of fabric and trying the cross-stitch fabric after you've gotten some experience and expertise.
That's a good idea, Kathy. I haven't done very much cross-stitching beyond the built-in stitches, so this will be interesting for me too. Would you tell us how to take a printed hand cross-stitch pattern and make it apply to a sewing machine?
First, you have to establish a starting point. On this monogram, I've decided to start here at the top of the T. Then I made a line that matched the same position on the fabric. The row I'm starting with has 8 double cross stitches in it, so I've entered program number 101 8 times into an empty M memory. Let's go to the machine and start sewing. Snap on presser foot number 2A and sew the M memory. Don't forget to press the single pattern key so the machine can do the counting for you. As you sew, watch how the cross stitches align with the red marks on the foot. Look at the way the crosses are sewn. It's very important to watch the direction of the crossover threads. At the top part of the T, notice that the top threads cross over from lower left to upper right. This crossover thread must be consistent throughout the embroidery. The next row we'll do is the stem of the T. It has 9 double cross stitches in it. I've entered program number 101 9 times into another M memory. Now, in order to make the threads cross over in the correct direction, I'll need to engage the mirror image key and use the left to right mirror image key. I'll be lowering the needle into the hole where cross stitches 4 and 5 meet. Align the cross stitches with the red lines on the foot. The single pattern key is still on. There, the stem of the T is complete. Next, we'll sew the single cross stitches on either side of the top of the T. For this, select program number 102 and engage both the mirror image key and the single pattern key. Lower the needle here and sew the left cross stitch. Now we'll do the one on the right side. There, we're finished, and all the crosses are going in the same direction.
Kathy, when you're embroidering a more intricate pattern, how would you plan it out?
The same way, but it will have more steps. I usually start with the longest and most center row, and then just continue my vertical rows outward.
If you didn't want to tackle such a large project, you could create borders and medallions by combining stitches in an M memory. I'd like to show you one I've used on this sample. This design requires only one memory. This is a very simple but effective design. Let's go and enter it in an M memory. Press the M key and select an empty memory. Now press the 0 to 9 key. Enter in program 107. One time in the memory. Enter program 105. One time in the memory. Enter 103. One time in the memory. Enter 105. One time in the memory. Now 107. Twice in the memory. That's all that's in the sequence. Press the sewing machine icon to exit the programming screen. And we're ready to sew. Engage the needle down key and sew until you reach a corner. As you approach the corner, press the single pattern button and sew until the machine stops. Pivot the fabric 90 degrees. Now continue sewing until you reach the next corner. Continue this sequence until you reach the starting point. It's that easy. The key to this type of cross-stitching is to watch the needle position where the cross starts and stops. If you look at the stitch chart on your machine or in your owner's handbook, you'll see that there are two sizes of cross-stitches. Programs number 100, 101, and 102 are large crosses. Programs 103 through 109 are the smaller cross-stitches. Notice the circles at the top. They designate the needle position at the beginning of the stitch. At the bottom, they are filled in dots. These designate the needle position at the end of the stitch. Always choose a cross stitch that starts in the same needle position than in the previous one ended in.
This will take a little planning, but you'll achieve the same great results that Philip did. Before we leave cross-stitching, I'd like to share this vest with you. It has maxi-stitch borders and an all-over embroidery in black. The stitch that I used was the connecting cross-stitch program number 100. No one ever believes this is a cross-stitch. So if you don't want to count cross-stitches, just use it as an all-over design. Now we'd like to show you some embroideries straight from the machine. This one resembles those expensive Swiss insertions. I call it scrolls and daisies. These insertions that we'll be showing you have been sewn on 100% cotton organdy. You could also use a 100% natural batiste or fine handkerchief linen. For a stabilizer, we use spray starch. Just spray and iron as usual, but do several applications. You will want to make the fabric very stiff.
That's right. The reason for doing this is to eliminate all the tedious tearing away you would have with other stabilizers. Also, this method will not leave those little bits and pieces that will show through the fabric. The natural fiber fabrics take to the spray starching exceptionally well. Some synthetics and blends will not starch up well, so you'll have to test your fabric. The next thing is to decide if you want to make yards of insertion like this or embroidery right onto your garment fabric. We're going to be sewing insertions. For the insertions, we've cut strips of organdy 2 inches wide and starched them. We've also drawn a line down the center which I'll use as a sewing guide. Kathy, why don't you continue with the scrolls and daisies?
Okay, Philip, let's go to the machine and I'll enter the memories. I'll start with the scrolls. Press the M key and open an empty M memory. Now press the 0 to 9 key and enter in program 180 and press OK. Now press OK to enter that into the memory once. Press Escape to return to the program number 180 screen and engage the mirror key and the axial mirror key. Press OK to enter that once. I need a few straight stitches at the end, so press the 0 to 9 key, enter stitch 0, and press OK. Change the length to 6 millimeters. And press OK twice. Engage the needle down key also. This way, if I need to stop to adjust the feeding of the fabric, it won't shift at the needle position. There, part 1 is done. For the daisy, I put program number 136 into a P memory and removed all the connecting stitches on the end. Engage the single pattern key and reduce the length to 6 millimeters and also the width to 6 millimeters. Sew a single pattern on each side of the curve just below the spiral. Center a daisy between each scroll set in the middle of the straight stitches. I'll sew 2 for you. Now you can clip all the connecting threads. In the center of each flower, I sew a dot. I use program number 9, which is the program for sewing buttons.
I like the way you move from flower to flower without stopping to cut the threads. It certainly speeds your sewing whenever you were doing lots and lots of single patterns.
Philip, why don't you tell us about this embroidered insertion?
This is an easy one. I call it flowers and ovals. The flower and oval section is straight from the machine. The P memory part only removes the connecting stitches in the leaves. I do that whenever I'm sewing scattered single patterns. I like to remove the connecting stitch if at all possible. Let's go to the machine. Let's do the flowers and oval part first. Press the 0 to 9 key. Select program 86 and press OK. Sew a row just as set by the machine. Now for the P memory part. I've already removed the connecting stitches at the beginning and end of pattern number 123. Engage the axial mirror key and the single pattern key. Sew one pattern at the bottom of this flower. Now I'll just turn the fabric and sew the opposite leaves. All that's left is to sew the centers. Use program number 9, the program for sewing buttons. Reduce the width to 3 millimeters and sew a single pattern in the center of each flower.
I already know where I'm going to use that new design program, a new blouse. But before I get carried away with new ideas, I'd like to show everyone how to use the ruffler attachment. All the ruffles on this little pageant dress were made with the ruffler.
The ruffler is so versatile. You can shear, make pleats, and sew them to flat fabric all at once. Let's take a closer look at the ruffler. The ruffler looks complicated, but it really isn't. There's a movable rack with slots on the front and a silver thumb screw on the top. Look closer at the rack with the slots. Each slot is marked. Going from right to left, they're marked with a 1, 6, 12, and a 0. The numbers stand for the amount of stitches between each pleat. 1 means a pleat every stitch, and 6 means there will be a pleat every 6 stitches. 12 means there will be a pleat every 12 stitches, and the 0 setting won't have any pleats at all. To change the setting, just lift the rack and then lower it over the desired setting.
So far we've been talking about pleats. You can adjust the depth of each pleat also. That's done with the silver thumb screw. When you turn the screw clockwise to tighten, you will get deep pleats. If you turn it counterclockwise to loosen, you will get shallow pleats. When you want to ruffle instead of pleat, adjust the screw for very narrow pleats, set the rack on number 1, and an average stitch length. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you how to attach the ruffler properly. I've already removed the presser foot and the presser foot holder or ankle. First, you need to attach the clear buffer onto the needle clamp. To do this, remove the needle and unscrew the needle clamp screw all the way off. You will need to use the longer of the two on your 7550. Slip it over the needle clamp and replace the white needle clamp screw. Fit the thumb screw into the hole in the presser bar. Just tighten it enough so it won't fall out. The forked arm of the ruffler goes around the needle clamp, and the 2 prongs go around the presser bar with the thumb screw between the 2 prongs like this. Tighten up the thumb screw. Now we're ready to ruffle. I'll set the rack on number 6, and I've tightened the thumb screw to make deep pleats. Put the fabric between the 2 metal projections right here. Now just sew away. Perfect little pleats. You can also gather one piece of fabric and attach it to a flat piece of fabric in one operation. Place the fabric to be gathered on the bottom between the same metal projections as we did before. The flat fabric needs to be on the top, but under this very short metal piece. All you have to do now is lightly guide the fabrics and keep them feeding smoothly. It's that quick and easy.
Kathy, I know you gathered and sewed the ruffles on at the same time. How did you determine the setting so that both pieces came out even at the end? Isn't that a little tricky?
It's not the least bit tricky, Philip. I cut sample pieces out of the scraps to test with. I just measure the flat pattern piece and divide that measurement into quarters. I use that quartered measurement to cut a strip of fabric. Then I measure the ruffle pattern piece and divide that into quarters. I use that quartered measurement to cut another strip for the ruffle. Then I adjust the ruffler and stitch the two test pieces together. If your fabrics don't match exactly on the first try, just rip them apart and tighten or loosen the thumb screw for more or less ruffling. When they match exactly, you're ready to ruffle on your garment.
As you can see, it doesn't take much time to set up the ruffler, and it certainly speeds the final sewing and gives you more professional results.
That's right. I used to pull up the gathering threads only to have them break midway. Now with just a little sample testing, I can zoom right through any ruffling job.
I'd like to show everyone how to do a different technique. This vest has a built-in stitch design that was sewn with the bobbin work technique. Bobbin work is exactly what it sounds like. We wind a decorative thread onto the bobbin. The reason for doing this is so we can use a wider range of threads to embroider with. Any thread that will not fit through the eye of the needle can usually be wound onto the bobbin. Since the thread we want to be seen is in the bobbin, we will now be sewing with the right side of the fabric face down against the needle plate.
I'll bet these are the threads that you use. They're all very interesting.
These are only some of the threads that can be used, Kathy. They are made by YLI, Madeira, and Coates & Clark. You'll need to use a stabilizer. You can use freezer paper or Pell-On stitch and tear. I'm going to use the stitch and tear today. The stabilizer goes against the wrong side of the fabric even though we'll be sewing upside down. I'll be using an all-purpose thread of a matching color in the needle. You can hand wind the bobbin, but I prefer to use the machine's bobbin winder. Let's go to the machine and I'll show you how to wind the thread onto the bobbin. Place the bobbin on the spindle and disengage the hand wheel. Hold the spool in front of the machine or in your lap. Bring the thread up the groove into the take-up lever from left to right. Now bring the thread around the guide and under the tension disc and over to the bobbin. Remember not to bypass the tension disc completely. Putting a little tension on the thread will make a more uniform bobbin. It will also wind a few more yards of the thread onto the bobbin. Wind the thread in clockwise around the bobbin several times, and with a slow but steady speed, fill the bobbin. Be careful to wind it evenly. Keep an eye on the spool to make sure it doesn't go traveling off the table to the floor. I think you'll agree that it's a lot quicker than winding your bobbins by hand. Since we're putting the heavy thread in the bobbin, we need to make a tension adjustment on the bobbin case. Your bobbin tension is set for using all-purpose thread, which is much lighter in weight than what we're now going to use. The standard setting is going to place too much tension or drag on the thread. And what will happen is that the bobbin thread will pull the needle thread to the bobbin side. This is not the look we want. The heavy thread should lay flat on the fabric with no sign of the needle thread. To achieve this, I need to loosen the bobbin tension. The larger black screw is the tension screw. Turn it counterclockwise to loosen it. Loosen it until the thread pulls through smoothly and without any resistance. You don't need a screwdriver, just press your thumb against the screw and turn. Insert the bobbin case into the machine and bring the bobbin thread to the top. I've selected program number 200. Now set your needle tension at normal and place the fabric face down on the needle plate with the stabilizer facing up. The first thing I like to do is bring the bobbin thread to the top of the fabric as I've already done. If you leave it under the fabric, it almost always winds up being sewn down exactly where you don't want it to be. So let's sew now. I'm not going to sew fast. The reason we sew slower is to give the machine time to lay down the threads. You should also keep the speed consistent. It gives you a really bold look. Bobbin work can be a very dramatic look and lots of fun to experiment with. Since I started to do bobbin work, I look at threads with a new eye. I no longer think, can it fit through the eye of a needle, or can I find a top stitching needle with a large enough eye to make the thread work? I know that I can try it in the bobbin, and that opens up a whole new range of resources for me. I now go into yarn and needlecraft shops and have found some great yarns and threads to use.
I agree with you, Philip. I keep my eyes open everywhere now. I think we should mention that you don't have to just use maxi-stitches for bobbin work. I like to think that there are 3 rules for bobbin work. They are: number 1, experiment; 2, experiment; and 3, experiment.
You're so right, Kathy. Those are good rules for making the most of your Pfaff Creative 7550. Anytime that you spend experimenting with your machine, the stitches, threads, fabrics, accessories, and techniques will always be worth it. I keep a sample book of all my experiments in the settings. This is a great reference tool. When I get an idea and try it out, I put it in my sample book. I even keep the ones that don't work out the way I had originally thought they would. Even the disappointments can spark an idea for a different fabric or thread.
I'm going to start a reference book like that also. It's a good idea. It can save you lots of time, too. You'll have all the information right at your fingertips just when you need it most.
Well, Kathy, it looks like our time is up. I think we better clean up the sewing room now.
Already? I was having so much fun sharing with you and everyone else. Okay, I'll fold the fabric while you clean out and oil the hook of our Creative 7550.
I know I enjoyed every minute, and I know we've opened doors to new ideas for all of you out there. So enjoy your Pfaff Creative 7550, and goodbye from me, Philip Pepper.
And from me, Kathy Wilkinson.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.